This is just going to be a quick video showing how I repurpose these 25 litre containers. I don't know, this is one use of them. There's multiple uses, and I've shared quite a few videos already, but this is just going to be quite concise, just to show one way of using every piece of the container itself. So what I've done here, the top, I've drilled a 25mm hole with a hole saw, and I use these for a kind of capillary reservoir for a wicking container. So what I've done here, this is actually the top of the container, and I've got the hole drill for the top, and I've got a 25mm electrical grommet on there, and they are a nice tight fit to actually fit the pipe in, and it's nice and watertight. It's a nice rubber seal on there. So what that does is it sits underneath like so, and you can actually use the piece of 21.5mm solvent well PVC as a kind of overflow. Alternatively, you can have a sort of tank with a float valve, and then you can define the level in here just with the little float valve in the reservoir tank, and that will feed into these from a kind of water butt, so it's got a bit of gravity head. Or we could alternatively, you could just use a mains water if you wanted to. But the idea is I've got this set up on a timer, so when the timer operates, the float tank fills up in like a little cistern, and then that cuts off when it's to that level, and then the timer stops. So then once it's up to this level here, then the plants use that up in a couple of weeks, and then next week or whatever, then the timer switches on and it fills it up again. So it gives you a little bit of aeration as well, and it makes sure the plants aren't going to dry out. So that's one way of doing it. And these tops, I've got a rubber washer on, and they're a nice watertight fit. So, and there's a nice coarse thread as well, so they're pretty quite sturdy. And these are quite well made just for single use items, so it's good to repurpose these and turn those into the little reservoirs. So that's one way of doing that. So I use the actual cap itself. Something slightly different with this one, I've cut the top off. So this is just like a little planter, and it's got holes in the bottom, so it's a bit like a sort of seed tray. It's quite deep, it's about 100mm deep, and there's a little upstand in the middle, so it's slightly shallower in the centre, but it's still got nice depth of soil there. And then the second part from the middle of the container is just cut off like a kind of collar. So what I'm using these for, I've got a green roof, and this is one of my examples of my green roof planting here, and it's doing really well. And I think part of that is down to the sort of activity from worms and the soil feeding stations underneath as well. It's been quite wet lately, but having those kind of wet food scraps does help retain a little bit of moisture, and then during periods of drought it makes that available for the plants. The plants will send roots out down into that material as it breaks down and get nutrients too. So what I've done with this is, as I said, this is the top of the container, so I've just chopped that off about 100mm deep. It's not that critical, maybe 120, 150 or something like that. And then this is the collar. So this is like a sort of soil, it's a bit like one of my soil feeding stations, but this is just designed to go into the sort of quite shallow planting depth on a green roof. So that's only 120mm deep. And then the container itself, this container here, I've planted up with the sedum and just some of the alpine plants, and I got some thyme in there, and that is just like a kind of lid, so that fits on. What I've done with this is I always drill a couple of holes. Just enables you to get a finger in there, and you can just lift that out. It makes it much easier when it's got plants all around it. So the idea with this, that goes onto the top of the green roof, so you'd have your waterproof membrane underneath, and then I use a bit of weed suppressant membrane as well, just as a sort of root barrier. And then you can put wood chip, shredded paper, layers of paper, tissue paper, kitchen towel from when you're kind of cooking, and then you'll put your food scraps on here. And then all you have to do is just lift up that container. This is quite heavy, and then that just sits on top of that soil feeding station, like so. and then you got all your worm activity under there, and then you just got your planter on top, so you'd never know it was there. What is quite nice about these is once every couple of weeks or so you can just alternate. You can lift one up, put some more kitchen scraps under there. If there's lots of castings, you can take the castings out and harvest those, do what you want with those, use them as a soil additive, make some worm teas or whatever, or you can just let the worms actually work that into the plants and improve the soil on the green roof. Obviously with these are perennial plants, so you can't really mulch those because they're already established, so it's quite nice just to have a little bit of nutrient coming through the worm bed underneath. So that's the top section and the middle section used up. And then what I've done here, the base section, I leave that because that's already watertight, so I haven't got to worry about sealing up any holes or anything in there. I leave it as it is, but just try and see if I can find it. Where is it? Yeah, I just grabbed something for you, so just demonstrate. I made this very simple jig, and the way that works, yeah, so the jig just four sides, got screw holes in there, that screws onto the container. What I do is I get a little block of wood, whatever height I want to make the thing, and then I push this underneath. It's quite hard to do this one-handed. Yeah, so I use that as a little sort of height stop. Then I can screw the container into that and then just run round with a multi-cut around the top. The little screw holes are quite good because they operate as a little overflow in there as well. So that's just the base of the container. So as I said, I've used the top, I've used the cap, I've used the top of the container and the little midsection for the soil feeding station. And then the base of the container, once again I use a 25mm hole saw. And then I drill through, and there's actually a mould line on here. And I just drill those where that mould line and then the joint in the mould crosses, and then I just drill that hole. Cut a little 40mm piece of solvent weld pipe. I'm using black PVC on this case, just because it looks a little bit neater. And what I've done here, I've got a beer can, I've punched some small holes in it, and then I've drilled a hole 25mm so that just fits over to the edge, over the end of the pipe there. So you can see, this makes like a little filter, so it stops that filler getting kind of full up with soil and worm casts, but it's quite straightforward just to put something through and fill that. And as with these containers, they are sort of two parts, so the grow bucket part will actually go on top. The grow bucket is very similar to these, but these ones are made very shallow just for a kind of green roof. The containers do vary a little bit. I try and get all the same ones if I can. This is actually the top of that container, so it fits in there quite neatly. This one here, if you notice, it's got those little corners, and that one corresponds with those. But it's not really critical. Once you've got your green roof planting, especially, that plants will trail over the edges and it will hide that container. You won't see that after a couple of weeks. But on this one, this is the capillary tray at the bottom. I fill that up with the beer cans and then sort of wicking cylinders, which I'll just see if I've got an example of. So that's a wicking cylinder, that fits in like that. And then I've got the beer cans around there, and then that just makes a capillary wick. It wicks up the moisture from the bottom and makes it available for the soil substrate or the compost in the planter itself. To fill these up, I've just got a PET bottle, and I've cut the bottom of the bottle off. I've got it inverted, and the top is a nice fit on this PVC. I haven't had to worry about sealing anything here because when I fill it up, it's only going to fill up to that level anyway. So there's a little bit of standing water in there, and it will tend to leak out a little bit there. I'm not worried because the main thing is that the water level is set by those small screw holes there anyway. So that's the capillary tray. The other thing, I've showed this in the videos before, I actually get capillary matting, and then I'll wrap that around the sides, and so it goes into the surrounding soil. and I've buried some of these in the raised beds in the greenhouse. And then the idea is the soil level will be up to here. You can water down under the base of the containers, and it just makes a little bit of moisture available, residual moisture in the soil. So it sort of stops the soil from really drying out, which can be a problem in greenhouses. But it works really well, and likewise, as I said, with these green roofs, I already noticed an improvement, and I think, especially during periods of drought, that's gonna be really, really healthy. I think this is a lemon thyme. Yeah, it's a beautiful scent, and this sedum grows really well. I think it's a sedum, but it's kind of succulent. Grows well in quite low light levels as well. I've got various sedums and sempervivums in here.